is down to that pure sentence or form.
Absolutely. That was Colin McCann's genius in painting.
Absolutely.
Simplification. Einstein explained the entire universe in 5 characters. It shouldn't take 500 pages to do something much less complex.
Is there, before we go to our panellists, Mike, is there a slogan that you don't think work? There were other ones. I mean, people are saying that the likes of "you can't beat Wellington on a good day" is good because it's kind of an informal, natural one.
Yeah, it is. But I think that the old slogan was much better. Just in terms of again, a bit of self-deprecation is good, but you can't beat Wellington on a good day. But that's almost it's a vernacular saying. It's like New York. No one actually paid to have the I Love NY. It just happened by itself, and those things are better if they're organic. Even the warehouse slogan, for example, I think it was done for $10. It was just a little jingle riff. And some of the best slogans are those that just happen either organically or serendipitously.
Interesting.
And are adopted, yeah.
Mike, so good to have you on. Thank you very much for that. Everyone gets a bargain for $10. That's cheap. This one, Raven, cost $145,000. What do you think of it?
I don't know. I like your question. What is the point? Is it meant to make the property prices in Dunedin go up? I mean, are we all meant to think, ooh, that city's got a great slogan, let's all move there?
I don't know, but there are some beautiful ones coming through. Stop and taste te poke. Timaru, touch, taste, feel. Wairoa, the way New Zealand used to be. What do you think, Alexia? What's in a slogan?
I think something that will last forever. I mean, Auckland City of Sales, they've tried to replace that as a slogan and nothing's worked because it is a city of sales.
Auckland A, what was wrong with that?
It was rubbish. That's right, because it's rubbish, let's face it. I mean, if you look out from your vantage point in anywhere in Auckland on a hill, that's what you see. You see sales. Sums it up. Well, I like this Plan D for Dunedin. It's self-depreciating. It's D for Dunedin. Some of the little slogans they've got with it, it's like Bali but with wetsuits. I think are quite clever. They remind me of all those. Remember in Flight of the Conchords, and Murray used to have a whole lot of New Zealand posters on his walls, and they'd say things like, and like Lord of the Rings, and just stupid slogans like that.
I think the Wellington one, like can't be Wellington on a good day. I always felt like that was a disclaimer. Like
sort of like it's not a good day today, but come back on a good day.
And then much smaller on a good day.
I kind of liked Absolutely Positively Wellington. What happened to that one?
I liked that one. I thought that was a very good one. Why didn't they bring that back, Raven?
Well, they
I don't know. That was huge, but equally, couldn't you just add any city's name at the end of that?
Absolutely Positively Hamilton.
I didn't laugh at that. I just want everyone in Hamilton to know.
Well, you're practicing not being funny, obviously.
Doesn't work. No, it needs Wellington, doesn't it? Have a great weekend, everybody, especially Raven Can and Lexi Russell. Wonderful to have you on the program. Thank you very much to my producer, Amelia Langford, who did a great job this week. I'm Wallace Chapman. Checkpoint's next. See you Tuesday, 3:45.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei. 3 months ago to the day, we had one active case of COVID-19. Today, we're back where we began, one active case. Cash for jobs. If elected, National's promising businesses $10,000 for each new worker they take on. But T's and C's apply. The 2 Trampers miraculously rescued from Kahurangi National Park broke all the lockdown level 3 rules. So do they even get a telling off? In the US, the National Guards called in to quell angry protests over the death of African-American man George Floyd. Back here, the police trial of its armed response team runs into multiple issues, and bags are packed, boarding calls at the ready. Thousands of Kiwis head off for the long weekend.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. Cabinet will stick to the timeline for reviewing the alert level settings, despite there only being one active COVID-19 case. No new cases were reported today for the 7th day in a row. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says while he endorses the enthusiasm of people wanting to move to alert level 1 now, Cabinet will review the settings again on June the 8th as planned. He says they will take into account the latest evidence.
And that's what we've done all the way through. We've made decisions in a way that I think New Zealanders have appreciated, have been careful and balanced. Bearing in mind, we stand here today with one of the most open economies and one of the most liberal regimes in the wake of COVID-19 of anyone in the world.
Grant Robertson says the government doesn't want to make mistakes that take the country backwards. Traffic is building up around the country as New Zealanders use the long weekend to check out their own backyard. The Transport Agency says the afternoon congestion hit an early peak at mid-afternoon as holiday goers left the main centres. Charlotte Cook reports.
Weather in many parts of the country is looking more than damp, so drivers are being asked to take extra care. The Transport Agency says a breakdown on the Harbour Bridge has caused delays, but it's now cleared. Parts of Auckland's northern motorway in Takanini and Green Lane have heavy congestion. And a serious crash in Mangere has closed both lanes at the State Highway 20 Mahunga Drive off-ramp, causing lengthy delays. Traffic heading north from the capital is backed up between Waikanai and Levin, and drivers are being advised to allow extra time. This is Charlotte Cook.
Drought-stricken Auckland can expect a pelting of rain this weekend, but not enough to break the dry spell. Ben Knoll from Niwa says rain is expected to hit the tip of the country on Sunday and move southeast during Monday. Parts of Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, Waikato and Bay of Plenty can expect up to 100 millilitres of rain, and motorists have been warned to watch for surface flooding and debris on roads. Mr Knoll says the rain is much needed but will not break Auckland's drought.
This will be, helpful, beneficial, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to the deficit that we've built up over the course of this calendar year, and we're going to need a lot more rainfall.
Ben Knoll from Niwa. A corrections officer was followed and shot at in Whanganui Prison, in the Whanganui Prison car park. Shots were fired at the officer's car around 9 o'clock on Wednesday evening. The Corrections Association President Alan Whitley says the man was not hurt in the shooting. He says 2 people are in police custody.
A staff member on their way to work ended up being followed, and the road leading down to the prison and onto prison property, shots were fired at his vehicle.
Alan Whitley says the police are investigating and details are still emerging. The government will now start publicly releasing the number of companies repaying the wage subsidy each week. Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni says the government receives a weekly report, including updates from the auditing team. Ben Strang reports.
The move to release the figures follows a report by RNZ saying that the auditing and repayment figures would be released only quarterly. Since then, Ms Sepuloni has asked for the number of companies making repayments and the amount they return to be included in weekly public reporting. She says this will help to ensure the $10 billion wage subsidy scheme isn't abused and that businesses providing false or misleading information are held to account. So far, more than 3,000 repayments have been made, amounting to $83.4 million. This is Ben Strang.
The Race Relations Commissioner wants an Auckland high school to apologise and educate one of its students after she wore blackface. Westlake Girls High School is investigating after the student posed and sent a blackface selfie with a caption using the N-word to friends during lockdown. It has since been shared widely online. Many social media users are calling on the school to take a stand against racism. Meng Foon says he's disappointed and expects the school, the girl and her parents to learn about the impact and harm caused by her actions. Demonstrators in Minneapolis have set a police station in the city on fire as they protest the death of another unarmed black man at the hands of police. George Floyd's death has reignited criticism of police treatment of black Americans. Protests have escalated over the past few days and the National Guard has been called in to help restore order. The chief of the city's fire department, John Fruitel, says right now it's too dangerous for him to ask his officers to put out the fire that's burning the police station. station.
We've had different projectiles swung at us the last 2 nights. Many of the windows of my Chiefs car right now are broken out from rocks. We have to really consider the safety of our firefighters in those areas, so we're being very, very cautious.
Many, including the city's mayor, have called for the officers involved in George Floyd's death to be arrested. It's 5:05. In sport, New Zealand Rugby has confirmed a revised version of the Farah Palmer Cup will kick off on August the 22nd, featuring a number of Black Ferns and Black Ferns Sevens players. The 13 teams will compete in North and South pools with 7 weeks of round robin before 2 weeks of playoff matches. Black Ferns Sevens star Ruby Tui is one player considered taking part to get in some much-needed game time before the World Sevens Series tournament returns.
Personally, I wouldn't have the opportunity to play until maybe later on in my career, so I think if people in our team want to play, it's an exciting idea. I can't confirm or deny anything right now. There's still decisions to be made, but yeah, I think women's rugby in this country is actually really exciting, and whatever way we can be a part of that, I'm on board it.
Ruby Tui last played in the Provincial Championship in 2012 before heading into Sevens full-time. The prospect of the 2020 Cricket World Cup in Australia going ahead in October seems more remote than ever, with Cricket Australia boss Kevin Roberts describing it as very high risk given the pandemic. Roberts says there is a potential window to play the tournament in the February-March period or October-November 2021. A decision will be made by the ICC next month. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, psychologist Professor Elizabeth Loftus, she bagged the idea of recovered memories. Now she appears as an expert witness for the likes of Harvey Weinstein. Speaking of which, Australian director Kitty Green has tackled the creepy office power imbalances which enable the Weinsteins of the world. And music writer Pete Paphides on his coming-of-age tribute to some really naff 70s bands. Join me, Kim Hill, Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, scattered showers becoming isolated tomorrow with fine spells increasing, fog patches tomorrow morning. Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, west of Te Puke periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery tomorrow. Cloudy periods and a few showers elsewhere. Waikato, Waitomo, Taupo, Taumaranui, Gisborne through to Wairarapa. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Taranaki, Whanganui, Taihape and Manawatu. Mostly cloudy today, a few showers for Taranaki, fine tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, mostly cloudy with scattered rain, clearing Horowhenua and Kapiti Coast tomorrow morning. For Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, rain for a time today, cloudy periods and isolated showers tomorrow. Canterbury, cloudy with patchy drizzle, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Westland, Fiordland, Otago and Southland, mostly fine. A few showers for Westland and coastal Southland and Fiordland. Valley fog may be persistent. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd shower. RNZ National, 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna, and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Closing in on elimination. On February 29, New Zealand had one active case of COVID-19. Today, exactly 3 months on, there is now only one active case of COVID-19, with no new cases reported for a 7th day in a row. To paint a quirky picture, according to Johns Hopkins University, that puts us on a par with Turks and Caicos and New Caledonia, and ahead of islands like Fiji, which still has 3 active cases, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Guam, Hawaii, Mauritius, the Maldives and the Cayman Islands. The Health Ministry says 7 more people have recovered and the total of confirmed and probable cases remains at 1,504. It comes as the limit on social gatherings increased to 100 people at midday today, making New Zealand one of the most relaxed regimes and the most open economies in the world right now, ahead of Australia, Canada, the UK and the US. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says a full week without any new cases shows what an incredible job New Zealanders have done in fighting the virus.
I do think it's really important that we acknowledge the success that we have had. That is a result of the work that we've done. It's a result of being careful. It's a result of being measured in the movements that we make. And I think New Zealanders can now say, as we look at a situation going into Queen's birthday weekend, it will feel very normal for a lot of people. They'll be going on holiday, they'll be going out and seeing their friends or their children play sport.
However, despite these positive signs, Mr Robertson says Cabinet will be sticking to the plan of reviewing the Alert Level 2 settings on June 8 and not earlier.
Cabinet constantly monitors the situation, but the 8th of June is the date that we've given ourselves and those who advise us to come up with their latest evidence. But I'm sure Cabinet will have a conversation on Tuesday about COVID-19. We do at every meeting, but we've clearly signalled that that's the date that we'll review the settings on, and the Prime Minister was very clear when she spoke that it would be no later than the 22nd. What I know that New Zealanders are looking for from us is to make sure that we take our decisions based on evidence and we keep moving forward in the right direction. And I think it was the Deputy Prime Minister himself in Parliament yesterday who noted the fact that the worst thing of all for New Zealand would be to go backwards again. We've made such incredible progress here. I absolutely get and endorse, in fact, people's enthusiasm to keep moving forward. We'll do that based on evidence, and our economy is now more open than most other countries in the world.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson speaking at a press conference this afternoon. Auckland University Professor Sean Hendy joins me now to explain the significance of having one active case in the country. Sean, the number one, how big a deal is that?
It's a huge deal. I mean, we really should be reflecting back on where we were early March, on the same trajectory as many countries overseas where we've seen the disease really spread out of control. And so to get that down to one active case and perhaps just be a few days away from zero active cases and that elimination target, it's quite an achievement.
So let's say we watch the press conference or get the media release tomorrow and they say no active cases. Can we say we've eliminated COVID?
Not entirely. I mean, at this point, it's kind of a statistical game. We know we've probably missed a few cases, right? I mean, the case count that we've got, no country in the world is absolutely sure that they've identified all cases. And this is the tricky thing about this disease is there are people who don't have strong symptoms at all, but can still be infectious. And so there's always that chance that you'll miss those cases. And so that's really the risk we're managing at the moment. Like, we're very confident about the cases that we know about. We've managed those well. People have isolated or gone into quarantine in order to prevent the spread to other people. So that's been done well. But there's always, there's this diminishing chance now that there are still a few cases out there that we don't know about. And so that's the risk we've got to manage. From here, though, that risk starts to become smaller and smaller. The more days that we see zero cases, and certainly once we go to zero active cases or zero known active cases, then the risk starts to shift to our borders. And incursions from overseas.
So when we get to zero active cases, how long do we need to be in that position before you would call it and say this is elimination?
Yeah, so there'll be a statistical threshold, and so sometime in the next week, we've been running our simulations this week to see how many of those simulations give us the kind of results we've seen over the last couple of weeks, and then how many of those go on to eliminate in the next week. And at the moment, this weekend, 90% of our simulations will be eliminating. So we can have a sort of a 90% confidence level that actually we've no longer got active cases in New Zealand, and that should give us some reassurance. I mean, there's good news. We went to level 3 and we didn't see an uptick in cases. We've been in level 2 now for a while, and we haven't seen that uptick in cases. But there's still that chance that there might be that one or two cases, unknown cases out there. And as we come back together, as we sort of go through these thresholds, get back into social gatherings, there's the possibility that we'll have another spreading event and we'll see more cases. So it's a risk management exercise at this point, Lisa.
So in terms of your modelling then, could you put a percentage on what number of cases you think are undetected? Is there any way of estimating that?
I mean, there's sort of big error bars around this at the moment, but we're talking about a handful of unknown cases at this point, and maybe zero. I mean, that's what our simulations are telling us, that we're very close to that zero number. So I think people, we've still got to be cautious because there's still that chance of border incursion over the next months as we do start to relax borders. So we've got to maintain our caution. But we can get back to something like life was back in February over the next few weeks.
Okay, so if you say about now we could be confident 90% there, we're 90% there, what does that number have to be where we should be opening up a Trans-Tasman bubble then, given alongside that number you're saying, well, the borders are the biggest risk?
Yeah, so I don't think there's it's very hard to express that in purely in numbers, right? It's going to come down to a judgment call. There are a lot of things in place now to protect us against a further outbreak. There's our contact tracing system, there's our testing regime, and then there's the kind of controls we have at the border. And when you pull all those things together, that's the thing that Cabinet's going to be looking at. It's going to be drawing on all these different bits and pieces, and it'll have to be confident that we've got all those things in place, as well as what our modelling is saying, which is actually, we're pretty confident there isn't undetected cases out there.
Okay, so this is your area of expertise, modelling, and I know you have looked at the scenario of a bubble. Would we need every state in Australia to have 0 active cases in order for you to be comfortable travelling back and forward between them?
No, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, we can, and it will depend on how we do surveillance at the border. I mean, New Zealand, we do this in biosecurity all the time, right? We manage the risk of introduction of pest species or pathogens at our borders, and so it's a similar situation. We're going to find ourselves in a very similar situation to the way we manage biosecurity, where it's about risk. And trading off the benefit of allowing people to travel, be reunited with family members, get back into tourism to help our economy in that sector, and we'll have to balance those risks. So I don't think there's a pure number that you can express it on. Obviously, places that start achieving numbers that are similar to ours, they should be higher on our list, and we can engage with them much more openly. And maybe that's the thing to do early as we test our systems, as we get more confident in the controls we have at the border.
So, if we're doing so well, which we seem to be, why do we need to, or do we need to stay at level 2?
I think now's the right time to start talking about level 1. Again, it's kind of this risk management exercise. What's going to be happening now in level 2 is we're going to be having those large gatherings again. Those large gatherings are, not only risky because it's the opportunity to spread the disease amongst many people, but they're also the sort of events that challenge our contact traces. So when you've got to trace, the 100 people that were at the bar, that puts a lot of strain on our contact tracing resources. So those are the risks with those kind of events. And I think we have to take that cautiously and step through those changes as we head back to normal life.
Good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. That is Professor Sean Hendy. Documents obtained by Checkpoint have revealed numerous issues and a serious lack of consultation before the launch of the police's armed response teams. The trials were launched in counties Manukau, Waikato and Canterbury last year in response to the Christchurch mosque attacks. But internal documents obtained by Checkpoint under the Official Information Act detail numerous issues. And as Nick Trubridge reports, papers show racism training has also been proposed to curb the ART's potential impact on Māori communities.
Many prominent Māori have been quick to condemn the police's armed response team trials. Now, official police documents appear to show their concerns are warranted. A major risk identified by the working group overseeing the trial was that armed response teams could be seen to disadvantage Māori. Police even proposed holding bias training with officers to mitigate that risk.
We are yet to address institutional racism in the New Zealand police. We know that there are officers out there, it's been in news reports and goodness knows what. In fact, I think somebody should OIA the HR reports, quite frankly. But we know that this has been a long entrenched problem within the New Zealand police for a very long time. It has not been resolved, it has not been addressed where any reasonable person would think that a police force should be fair, equitable and unbiased.
That's New Zealand Māori Council Executive Director Matthew Tukaki. The trial's wrapped up in April, but he's worried armed response teams could become permanent and is concerned about what this could mean for his people.
I remember the dark days when the Samoan Pacific Island community were being targeted by immigration officers as well. I mean, have we not learned the lessons of where we went wrong before? I would argue strongly we've got a lot more lessons to learn if we can't even get this one right.
And New Zealand Police is well aware of the problem. A communications plan released to Checkpoint under the Official Information Act identifies the risk of ARTs being seen as a new force to use against Māori. It goes on to say this could be mitigated by actively working with communities, partners and the justice sector to improve outcomes for Māori. But Tūkaki has other ideas.
It's about the individuals who made the decision that thought it was acceptable to trial something with no evidence, no strategic direction, no good governance over the whole thing, or even consultation with Māori. So no, the New Zealand government and the New Zealand police were very clear what the mood of the New Zealand Māori Council was. And it also begs the question that we have nearly 1,000 New Zealand Māori wardens out there who also have significant powers and are warranted. And they are the people that we could have a look at activating more to help with incidents where they involve Māori whānau and communities.
Armed response teams were introduced following the deadly Christchurch mosque shootings last March. But another document reveals New Zealand Police undertook limited consultation with Māori, and consultation with Muslim communities was also limited. All of this has Tūtaki questioning why the trials went ahead at all.
It is absolutely silly that the risk assessment that was made didn't stop this whole thing from happening at the beginning until they had worked out what their overall strategic plan was. But no, somebody thought it was a good idea and off they went.
The police would not be interviewed for this story, but Police Association President Chris Cahill says New Zealand Police should come under fire for its poor attempt at consultation.
Well, I certainly think it's a fair criticism that due to the quick introduction of these, insufficient consultation was done, not just with Māori, but with actually the wider community as well. And that's necessary, that should take place.
However, he believes ARTs will ultimately help, not hurt Māori.
I think it's also very important to remember that Māori aren't only overrepresented in crime statistics, but also very much overrepresented in victimisations. And these firearms are being used disproportionately against Māori and other minority ethnic communities. So they are being protected by these ARTs as well. And it's well worth remembering that throughout the trial of ARTs, no officer had to shoot someone, but they did resolve a number of serious incidents safely. And that is a big plus for the trial.
Police documents show ARTs are meant to be focused on call-outs where there is significant risk to staff or public. Police refused to release all documents related to the trial, but an incident report for its first 2 months show officers mostly followed up on cars and vehicles acting suspiciously. Despite that, Cahill says there is a need for armed response teams, claiming police are dealing with more firearms incidents than ever before.
I think the issue we have also is with the change in environments. The AOS model of staff being called out, having to go to a base, equip themselves and then travel to a scene has serious limitations. So having staff available with expertise and equipment to attend immediately is advantageous. But that has probably not been communicated very well, is that there was never going to be a case where these specialist squads could go from job to job of the serious firearms nature. They were always going to have to do such things as dangerous vehicle stops, assisted search warrants, that sort of thing. The model of having them waiting around like a fire brigade for a fire simply doesn't work in the police environment, and they need to be deployed 24/7 while they are actually working.
An October 2019 briefing paper shows even before the trial started, police were already expecting it would show ARTs improved officers' ability to respond to the most serious of jobs, while also minimising risks to the public. But a police spokeswoman says it's premature to determine what the evaluation might find.
We recognise the ultimate question of the style of policing we adopt needs to reflect a wider conversation across our whole community, balanced with the need to make sure we can keep the public and our people safe. Any options that come out of the review will be consulted with communities as part of our efforts to take a collaborative approach to policing. How the public feels is important, as we police with consent of the public, and that is a privilege.
New Zealand Police will release its evaluation next month. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
It is 25 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know if you're on the road heading away for the long weekend. What is it like out there? If you've got something to say about the armed response teams, get in contact too. And one active case of COVID-19 remaining. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The US National Guard has been called in to quell angry protests in Minneapolis after the death of George Floyd in police custody. The unarmed black man died when a white police officer pressed his knee against his neck for several minutes. George Floyd begged to be released, saying he couldn't breathe, but was ignored. Thousands of people in Minneapolis took to the streets for the third day in a row, leading to a local emergency being declared. Alicia Smith was one of those protesting peacefully.
It broke my heart. It was devastating. There are no words in the English language that will convey the despair that I felt watching that man life leave his body and him scream out for his mother. I heard my son saying, "Mama, save me." That's 11 and 5. My kids are little boys. And my son asked me, am I going to live to be a grown-up?
But it hasn't all been peaceful in Minneapolis. Some shops and the city's police station have been set on fire and officers pelted with rocks and bottles. Many, including the city's mayor, have called for the arrests of the police officers, but a county attorney, Mike Freeman, is defending them.
That video is graphic and horrific and terrible, and no person should do that. But my job in the end is to prove that he violated a criminal statute. And there is other evidence that does not support a criminal charge.
The BBC's Nader Tawfiq has more.
America's long and painful history of police brutality has always been an open wound. In Minneapolis, for the second day, demonstrators spilled into the streets after the death of George Floyd. Their protests, an outlet for the emotional trauma of watching unarmed black men die at the hands of police year after year. But as the night wore on, the peaceful chants were drowned out by violence. As the unrest spread, a rush of people began looting and vandalizing property. For hours at this store, crowds took down the aisle, stealing electronics and other goods. The anger turned into a night of fires that engulfed the Lake Street neighborhood.
It's unfortunate. It's sad. If people are there, truly there, to honor the memory of the decedent and the family, this isn't how you do it.
Police said the 46-year-old was arrested for allegedly using counterfeit money and had resisted officers. But video footage of the start of the encounter bore little resemblance to that official account. And then this moment, which has left many sickened. A white police officer identified as Derek Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck for more than 7 minutes, even as he repeatedly said, "I can't breathe."
I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe.
New details are emerging about what happened once paramedics arrived. They found him unresponsive and without a pulse. For nearly an hour in the ambulance, they tried to revive him, but he was later pronounced dead at the hospital.
We can't breathe. Everyone. We can't breathe. Yeah.
Activists are keeping up the pressure, calling for the immediate arrest of the 4 officers to face criminal charges. Joining them was the mother of Eric Garner, a man who died under similar circumstances in 2014 in New York.
The police officers come into our neighborhoods. They brutalize. They terrorize. They murder our children. And we have done nothing.
Minneapolis is still smoldering from the chaos, and the city is preparing for more unrest, even as George Floyd's family calls for calm.
The BBC's Nader Tawfiq. Buses are back, camper vans are going cheap and thousands of Kiwis are hitting the road for the long weekend. It's the first public holiday we've had since lockdown restrictions eased, and plenty of New Zealanders are taking the opportunity to see a slice of their own backyard. For some, it's a holiday. For others, it's a chance to catch up with much missed friends and family. Our cameraman Nick Munro and reporter Nita Blake-Person headed out to hear about people's getaways. They filed this report.
New Zealand welcomes customers travelling on flight 8165 to Gisborne and invites you to board your...
The sights and sounds of a weekend away. Boarding calls and bags packed ready for the ride, be it planes, buses, cars, even camper vans.
Can you ride?
Xtina snapped up a deal on this camper van for $29 a day.
We're heading on the east coast somewhere, I don't know where yet. We're going till Monday and we'll be visiting some family that we haven't seen for a very long time. And this will be also our first camper van experience, and because we could never afford it before, and as soon as I saw it on the news, I said, Mum, we're booking it and we're going.
It's off to Gisborne for Josh, his wife and 6 kids in their motorhome.
That's what it's all about, is hitting the road, so we don't need to book accommodation, we can stop wherever we want to, and just no plans.
And Tauranga man Jason is also hitting the road with his family. He's keen to splash the cash.
My wife and my kids, so yeah, it'll be a bit testing. Going to have 4 kids in here. Lockdown all over again. So we're heading down to Taupo, then probably to Waitomo and ending up back in Auckland on Monday at some point. It's about going to the local cafes and anything that's New Zealand local or locally sourced. So keen to support those businesses.
Grant Webster is the chief executive of THL, which owns Maui camper vans. He says today's their busiest day on record.
We're booked out this weekend. We certainly make no money out of these pricings. No one can make money at $29 a day. But this is about the 2 simple things. This is about saving jobs, and it literally is. And it's about helping the regional economies, and it's making a difference there. So the vans were sitting around. The small price is just the marginal cost. So it's not about making money, it's about doing the right thing. So it's working.
While Auckland Airport was far from its usual Queen's birthday buzz, domestic flights were busy. It appears Queenstown's the place to be.
Heading down to Wanaka, just a weekend away, long weekend away. Going to meet up with some friends down there, get out in the water, a bit of kayaking, so just enjoy the great outdoors. New Zealand way, getting out in the backyard.
We're heading off to Lake Hawea for the weekend to catch up with some girlfriends. So we're going to be heading out to see some cafes. Well, I'm lucky I've still got my job and working, so it'd be good to help the local economy down there.
Other travellers had long overdue visits planned to friends or family.
See family and friends just to get away. We had flights booked for the Easter weekend, but of course,
pandemic
lockdown
hit,
happening. So,
lockdown.
Yeah, first opportunity we're in.
My brother's moving over to Oz as soon as the lockdown's over, so I've just flown up from Oamaru to sit down there and pretty much surprise him. So there's a whole bunch of us sort of coming to town, and he hasn't worked it out yet, so flying down to New Plymouth next.
And regional buses are back on the road just in time for the holiday, bringing families back together from across the country.
Heading to Tokoroa. I go to boarding school here, I go to Dilworth, and it's just nice to know that I can travel home now safely.
I'm glad that the buses are running now and for the long weekend, so it's nice to be able to go down and visit the family.
Intercity General Manager Sam Peet says today is huge for their services, but things look a little different on board.
On board the bus, we are only selling 50% of the seats, so that means that everyone gets a window seat, so that's great news. And there's some slightly different procedures when it comes to boarding the bus, the way that we load our luggage into the coach just to keep people safe, and of course we've got hand sanitizer on board all of our coaches that people can use during their journey. All of the seats that we've got available to sell are full, so we're wrapped, and it's great to get New Zealand moving again.
And while there's still some way to go in getting Aotearoa back to the travel and tourism we're used to, whānau reuniting across the country is a step in the right direction.
Back to normal.
Back to normal. For Checkpoint, Cornita Blakeperson, tēnei.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National pledges us cash handouts for businesses if it gets elected come September. The $20,000 bill for the rescue of the Nelson Trampers who breached lockdown rules, and our top flight netballers are finally back on court. We'd love your feedback about anything you've heard on the program this evening, especially if you're stuck in long weekend traffic. Get someone who can safely text us to let us know what it's like out there. They can text on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go now to Susanna with the headlines.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson says Cabinet will take into account the latest evidence there when it reviews the country's alert level settings. He says that will happen on June 8th as planned, despite calls to move earlier with only one active COVID-19 case and 7 days with no new cases. Traffic is heavy on motorways leading out of the main centres as people head away for the long weekend. The Transport Agency says motorists should expect delays on state highways and advises them to take extra care with rain forecast in the north from Sunday. The Union for Prison Guards says an officer was shot at in the Whanganui prison car park on Wednesday night. Alan Whitley says the man was in his car and was not hurt. He says 2 people are in custody and the police are investigating. The government is to begin releasing to the public how many companies repay the wage subsidy each week and how much they give back. Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni says the government receives a weekly report, including updates from the auditing team. The fire chief in Minneapolis says it's too dangerous to approach a burning police station in the American city as protests escalate over the police killing of another unarmed black man. A video showed George Floyd gasping for his last breath as a police officer knelt on his neck, reigniting anger at police treatment of African Americans. The National Guard has been called in to help restore order after days of violent protests. The Race Relations Commissioner wants an Auckland high school to apologise and educate a student who posed in blackface and shared the image online. Meng Foon says he's disappointed and expects the school, the girl and her parents to learn about the impact and harm caused by her actions. Westlake Girls High School says it's investigating and many social media users are calling on it to take a stand against racism. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time for the business news now with Nona Peltier. Nona, consumer confidence. Well, this is an interesting turn of events, improved slightly from last month. What can you tell us?
It was pretty bad last month, so I can tell you that for sure. So last month it was about as bad as it had ever been, and this month just passed. Not as bad. Expectations are still pretty poor around, the economy, people's own outlook. Some people think it's still not a bad time to buy a major appliance, but an awful lot of people don't think it's a good time to do anything. In fact, they're keeping their money in their pocket if they have any. And house prices are expected to fall, which is probably the most concerning part of this survey because so much of New Zealand's wealth is invested in their own home. And if they're expecting their prices to drop, that really goes to the heart of their economic story, so yeah, it could be quite serious. Unemployment and so on, these kinds of things have definitely been feeding into these numbers. So overall, it's what you would kind of expect. But it does indicate that there's going to be some really tough times ahead. And the ANZ that put out this survey suggests that, we have come through COVID-19 in terms of the lockdown and all of that fairly well, but there's economic wreckage in every direction.
Okay. Big infrastructure investor has reported a strong profit boosted by its recent investment in Vodafone. What's this all about?
Okay, so this is a company called Infratil, and they own all sorts of power companies. They own, well, not completely. They invest in power companies, data centers, Vodafone, airports. They have Wellington Airport, all sorts. And they invest in renewable energy, not just in New Zealand, but also Australia. They've got a big investment there, as well as the United States. Overall, the company has done extremely well. Last year, they sold one of their wind farms for over $1 billion, and they reinvested that money into Vodafone, which they bought a half share for about $1 billion. They also invested another $1 billion in all sorts of other projects to improve their own position, and they ended up with a profit of $484.2 million. Part of that is the proceeds from the sale of the wind farm, and that compares with $52.4 million the year before. Now that's a 9-fold increase, big increase over the year earlier. The company is said it was really hard to put an outlook on their this financial year, but they were saying that their data centers have government contracts, and so that they'll do better than others. And so it should be quite interesting to see how I've got something that just came in for you.
Thank
there you go. Just arrived.
We'll get to that in a minute.
So overall, Infratil has done pretty well, and their outlook is uncertain. Like every other company we talk to, they don't want to put a forecast on their earnings.
Well, they've got a mixed business, haven't they? They've got some essential services, and then other things like aviation could be a complete
the
opposite
Wellington
story.
Airport's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the outlook for that? Someone asked, and they said, well, what's an airport worth today? Who knows? Not a lot. Not as much as it was before, for sure. So overall, then, our market did actually not too badly. It had a bit of a choppy session in the afternoon, and that's partly because of the concern with what's going on in Hong Kong and what Donald Trump might say overnight. He's expecting to make a statement. He's already flagged that he's going to be making a statement, and there's some current concerns there that he may sever the special economic relationship that Hong Kong has with the United States. If that happened, the Hong Kong market could definitely, the characteristics would change. That could be a big fallout there. So a bit shaky in Asia, but not us. We rose 0.25% today, 26 points up to 10,882. And our dollar, little changed, 62.1 US cents, 93.3 Australian, and 50.3 British pence. But look, everything could change tomorrow.
Thanks, Nona. And while we were talking, actually, we just got a traffic update. I'll give you some information here. A lot of you getting in touch. This person says, traffic from Wellington to Otaki is a nightmare. We left town at 3 and have only just made it to Otaki. P.S. A hi to Nita Blake person. Nita probably says hi back. And this person says, bumper to bumper, crawl into Tauranga, coming over the Kaimais. Worth it to see my 9-year-old son, though. And this one, the traffic is a standstill on much of the southern motorway. We get to move every half minute, finally easing a little around Papakura. And that's from Jack H, who's age 12, obviously in the passenger seat. Thank you for being careful with your texting. Staying with the business theme, National is promising hundreds of millions of dollars in cash handouts, for business at least, if it gets elected come September. It will give $10,000 to employers for each new worker they hire, with individual businesses able to claim up to $100,000 for a total of 10 new staff. The fund will be capped at $500 million, and companies applying for it will have to prove the job is new and permanent. They'll get half the money up front and the other half after 90 days. The scheme would run for 5 months and only applies to existing businesses that would also have to sign declarations stating the job was real. I talked to National's finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith a little earlier and asked him what evidence there is that cash payments would lead to extra jobs being created.
This particular target today is wanting to just encourage small businesses with that $10,000 injection to help them get them over the line to hire an additional person and give somebody a job.
You've accused the government of spraying money around. Well, how is this targeted? What is the evidence that this would create more jobs than would otherwise be created without it? Where is the evidence and how many jobs?
Well, look, I mean, you can't roll out a piece of paper and say this is the evidence that it will create additional jobs. I'm sure every small business that you talk to will say, look, on the margins, they'll be thinking about whether they could go from 4 employees to 5. And if this helps tip a few of those small businesses over the line to take a chance, take a punt, take that extra person, it'll be helpful. And also, it's fundamentally a way of getting some cash into the hands of those businesses.
So it's a subsidy. It's a subsidy you're subsidising rather than incentivising.
Well, you were encouraging those small businesses to take on that extra person, recognising the extraordinary circumstances that we are. Well, this is not something that would normally
How do you know they wouldn't have already taken that person on, though? Because if there is, growth in their business, they'll be looking to take people on. They would create a job anyway.
Sure, and if this $10,000 helps them in their business and encourages them to continue to grow and expand, then it will be a useful thing. We're talking about, at the moment, at the very good times, the New Zealand economy under the last 2 years of National was creating about 10,000 new jobs a month. And we're thinking for the first 5 months, of the next government term, we will be desperate for new jobs. And, we talk about the health services heroes during the lockdown. Well, the heroes of the next period of our national history will be those small businesses who take a chance, hire a new person, and look to expand. And we just want to make it a bit easier for them to do that.
But isn't the critical point that you were saying that this is to create more jobs, yet you have no evidence it will create more jobs, and there's no way of knowing whether that business would have created the job anyway? So it's just a cash handout.
Like I say, there will be instances where it will tip businesses over the edge and give them the encouragement to take on that extra person. And if it's a way to get some extra dollars into the hands of those small businesses that are really struggling at the moment, we think in the circumstances that's worthwhile, and it will help with that overall recovery. It's not the only thing that we're going to do, of course. The critical thing is core good quality government practice. It's about keeping regulations low, not overtaxing, not changing all the rules all the time, allowing investment to flow. All those things are important, as is good quality infrastructure.
Can you give us the name of a specific business?
The Minister of Finance was keen to, not really, he was broadly supportive of it. He was struggling to find some reasons to argue against it and didn't really come up with them.
Okay, I'm wanting to ask you about your policy and what you're doing. So can you name a small business, a specific small business who's really keen on this idea and says it would encourage them to bring on more people?
Well, I'm not going to go out and say that the pie shop in Tamaranui is in favour of this particularly, or the hairdresser in Whangamata.
Because presumably you've spoken to some of them, small businesses. If you think they need it, you must have canvassed them. So can you just give us maybe one name of someone who says they would take on more workers as a consequence of this?
Well, I'm not going to come up with individual examples. What we're talking about is a sector which is responsible for, there are 500,000 small businesses in this country, most of them sole traders, and about 100,000 of them have between 1 and 5 employees. And like I say, if we could persuade or if we could encourage some of them to take a chance and take on an extra person, that will make it easier. And that's what we're looking for. At the moment, look, I don't think people quite appreciate the scale of the economic challenge that we face. We heard only yesterday that the country's lost 37,000 jobs over April, and the projections are absolutely terrible for the next few months ahead. So, we need to have first and foremost stopping the pain by opening up the economy, getting cash into the hands of those businesses that need it.
I think your leader made it very clear about the situation that he believes we're facing. He said yesterday, and I'm quoting him here, most New Zealanders are unemployed, but they don't know it yet. So where does that figure come from? And how many people is he saying? If he's saying most New Zealanders are unemployed, what is he saying, 50%, 51%? That's most?
No, I think what he was referring to there was the fact that we've got 1.7 million New Zealanders currently being supported by the wage subsidy. And the big unknown question right now is how many of those 1.7 million New Zealanders who are being supported by the wage subsidy have in fact are working for a company that won't survive the end of the wage subsidy.
He said most New Zealanders are unemployed. No, this is really important because National puts itself up as the party of numbers, the party who is in control of the economy. He specifically said he can read his spreadsheet and he's good with numbers. He came out and said most New Zealanders are unemployed, but they don't know it yet. Was he just throwing around an inaccurate figure here, and a really important figure?
Yeah, what's really important, and I'm quite clear what he was referring to, and that was the 1.7 million New Zealanders currently receiving the wage subsidy.
So is he saying they're all going to become unemployed when the subsidy runs out?
No, well, the question that we don't know, nobody knows, is how many of those are going to be facing unemployment at the end of the wage subsidy period.
So did he just make that figure up?
Well, look, I didn't hear the reference to most, and if it was said, I'm sure it was.
So is he wrong?
In relation to something else. No, I'm not saying he's wrong, I just didn't hear the quote, and I heard him talking about that exact situation only an hour or so ago, and that he was referring to the people on the wage subsidy, those 1.7 million New Zealanders, and there's no point sort of trying to sort of win points over this or anything. I think that's simply a simple reference to the fact that there are a lot of New Zealanders on the wage subsidy. Nobody knows how many of those people actually don't have a job or won't have a job at the end of that wage subsidy period.
And can voters trust the National Party when referring to the economy to stick with the facts then?
We'll do our absolute best to get it right, and we'll make a few mistakes from time to time, but I'm very confident that we will do our best to describe the situation as accurately as we can, and also to provide practical and effective ways to get New Zealand back on track.
And that was National's finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith there. Love your feedback about that job, subsidy, $10,000 cash payment for new jobs. Let us know what you think of that. A lot of you getting in touch. You're out on the road. Fantastic. Heading to all parts of the country. This from Katie and family, driving to Napier from Wellington. Just stopped at Paihia to let my son out to go to the loo. We all can see this in our mind's eye. Traffic is heavyish but running freely. I'm grateful for Highway 2. Lucky there's more than one way out of Wellington. Grateful for level 2 so that we can go and see Granny, who has been on her own for months. Safe travels, Katie. This person says travelling south towards Ashburton on State Highway 1. Heaps of cars travelling at 100 k's an hour. Traffic out of Hamilton, according to this person, on State Highway 1 south is at a standstill after the expressway. And in Christchurch, a listener says it's 20 k's an hour on State Highway 1 heading north out of Christchurch. So keep them coming. We'd love to know what it's like out on the roads there. You can text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A family friend of a woman murdered by her son in West Auckland last year says her friend would still be alive if she hadn't been discharged from hospital. Martin Marinovich strangled his mother Nolene before smashing her head with a hammer in their Oratia home last February. He was struggling as his mother's sole caregiver at the time, telling a family friend he couldn't cope before murdering her the day after she was discharged from hospital. Today he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 14 years. Our court reporter Annika Smith filed this story, and just a note to listeners, it contains distressing details.
Martin Marinovich strangled his mother Nolene in their Oratia home before attacking her head with a hammer. The police found her body covered in a blanket shortly after he called 111 and told the operator he'd killed her. The bloody crime scene was laid bare during a trial last year, but it was the sad backdrop to the murder that struck a chord in court this morning. Family friend Janet Daniel broke down as she told the court she feared no one would be there for the defendant on his eventual release from prison.
He will be alone in this world. He will have no one else in this world. This is the true tragedy of what happened. Two people who truly loved each other, were devoted to each other, have lost their lives.
Nolene Marinovich was 59 years old when she died, with a long history of bipolar disorder and ailing physical health towards the end of her life. Her son Martin, 28 years old at the time, was her sole caregiver. He ran the household on his mother's sickness benefit, managing her medications and helping her round the house, including toileting. Marinovich said he'd snapped after an argument with his mother the night he murdered her. Ms. Daniel said he'd told her he couldn't cope during her last hospital admission.
The last time I saw Nolene was at the hospital. She was in a terrible state as she had had 3 severe falls. When Martin was leaving, I went into the corridor and told him not to take her home. I knew he couldn't care for her. I knew it was too much for him.
But Nolene Marinovich did go home to be cared for by her son. She was dead the next day. Ms. Daniel told the court she believed the Waitemata DHB didn't care about her friend, who should have been discharged to a care facility. In a statement, a DHB spokesperson said there had been no indication Ms. Marinovich's home environment was unsafe, and if there had been concerns about her safety, wraparound support would have been put in place. Martin Marinovich's defence lawyer, Shane Tate, said nothing his client could do or say could make up for the hurt and loss he'd caused.
By killing his mother, like Mr. Marinovich has pointed out, he's not only lost his freedom, but he's lost the closest person to him and really one of the only people that's truly loved him.
Mr Tate submitted a sentence of 14 years was appropriate. Justice Walker stopped short of imposing a minimum sentence of 17 years sought by the Crown and required by law for particularly violent crimes. She said the murder was not premeditated and Marinovich had no previous convictions and had since been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. The judge said she accepted he was genuinely remorseful.
You have written to the court stating that you loved your mum with all your heart and that you struggle daily with deep regret at the unimaginable pain and suffering you inflicted, that you take full responsibility and wish you could turn back time.
Justice Walker jailed Marinovich for life with a minimum non-parole period of 14 years. Ātui te ko Timatua ko Annika Smith aho.
Now to Queenstown, where bidders have started testing the water in one of the country's most expensive property markets. 21 residential properties were up for sale today when Bailey's Queenstown conducted its largest auction post-lockdown. But despite only 5 going under the hammer, real estate leaders say it's not a time to panic. Tess Brunton has been watching the auction.
800, welcome to you, sir, and good luck with your endeavours. My lamplighter at $800,000, perhaps I would see 850, perhaps is there a 50,000 rise, but at 8 neat, I have my guy here at 800,000.
Last year, Queenstown's average asking price surged past $1.1 million. Fast forward a year and the formerly prosperous resort town is battling rising unemployment, low job opportunities and more people seeking welfare support. Speaking before the auction, Bailey's sales manager and executive director Stacey Coburn says no one knows what that means for property prices or demand.
Certainly key, I think, at the moment is no one really knows where this market is. No one really knows what values are. So this will certainly help settle things down and give us some benchmark values to push back on, and people can see perhaps where the market's at and give them some reassurance in terms of values going forward.
He's pleased to see people returning to the auction house today. It was standing room only.
There's people that are not too bothered with the current environment, and the COVID period doesn't bother them too much. We've still got people keen to inquire on property in Queenstown. We had some deals conclude over the course of lockdown.
Independent economist Benji Patterson says necessity will spur most sales as many lives and livelihoods have changed dramatically.
In Queenstown, everything is quite raw. We've seen an initial wave of redundancies. There will be more to come over the months ahead, and there will be a secondary wave in some of those support industries that do emerge. But at the same time, there is some optimism.
Mr Patterson says the auction is such an early barometer of property demand, as no one wants to be the guinea pig and set a pricing trend. But he says the demand for the Queenstown lifestyle won't have disappeared.
Second call at 9.5, then third and final call, delighted to announce to you, sir, it is going.
The first property to go under the hammer was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom property in Lake Hayes. It sold for $950,000. As the auction progressed, bidding was hesitant, with multiple separate meetings being held. The top price was a $1.25 million 7-bedroom, 5-bathroom home, built last year in Lower Shotover. Real Estate Institute of New Zealand Chief Executive Bindi Norwell says the Queenstown auction is not a straightforward gauge of demand.
We've got more expats wanting to move to the Queenstown. We've got better lifestyle choices. But on the other side, it's an area that's been significantly impacted by the tourism market as well, and may see more unemployment. So I think we're being quietly optimistic at the moment. But today will be a really good indicator of how the market is faring at the moment.
Only 5 of the 21 properties were sold. The rest were passed in as they didn't reach the lowest price the owners were willing to sell for. 8 of them didn't receive a bid. She isn't too fazed that many properties didn't sell at auction.
We are in a post-COVID environment, so we are trying to find a new normal at the moment. And I think what's happened is the expectations between buyers and sellers, they're just a bit out of whack at the moment, so we need to find our new normal.
Instead, Bindi Norwell says many will be negotiated and sold over the coming days. For Checkpoint, Tess Brunton, TNA.
A lot of you are getting in touch about the traffic out there. Apparently it's pretty bad by Otaki and Waikanai. Someone says dead stop on State Highway 1. So keep that information coming to us and we'll let you know what the situation is like out there. On National's, cash for jobs policy, if it comes in at the next election, it's offering $10,000 for every new job created. This person says, as a business owner, $10,000 is not enough for a commitment to at least $60,000 a year plus overheads. That's from David in Auckland. Sam, though, says, I've just made a lot of staff redundant. If the recession isn't as bad as we expected, we will have to employ more staff. $10,000 per staff member is like winning lotto. I'm a small business. Gary's raising concerns about what safeguards are in place to ensure people are employed in meaningful and productive work, not doing handyman and dog's body jobs. Someone else says Goldsmith's plan would encourage employers to sack staff in October so they can re-employ them in November under National scheme to get the subsidy. And someone else says, we'll get to that after the news.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. There is now only one active case of COVID-19 in the country, but an expert on data modelling is warning there will be fresh challenges ahead. For the 7th day in a row, no new cases have been reported. Auckland University Professor Sean Hendy says there is a risk cases have been missed, but the risk is becoming smaller and smaller. He told Checkpoint the figures show the major achievement the country has made, but the risk management will be important in the future.
We've been in level 2 now for a while and we haven't seen that uptick in cases, but there might be that one or two unknown cases out there, and as we come back together, get back into social gatherings, there's the possibility that we'll have another spreading event and we'll see more cases.
Professor Hendy says easing border restrictions will be another challenge to controlling the virus. Musicians are excited about the $16.5 million earmarked to help them recover financially. The government funding announced today for New Zealand's popular music industry includes $5 million for a live touring fund. Musician Nadia Reid is pleased with the announcement as her touring schedule was cancelled 24 hours after COVID-19 hit.
It just makes me feel quite thrilled because I think there has been a lot of, anxiety building in the performing arts sector.
Nadia Reid. It comes as part of a $175 million package announced today to boost the arts. The package also includes millions for commissioning and supporting local and national projects. Only a fifth of the properties up for sale in a large residential auction in Queenstown have sold today. 21 properties went under the hammer in the Bailey's Queenstown auction. 5 sold while the rest were passed in as they didn't reach the reserve price. Real Estate Institute of New Zealand Chief Executive Bindi Norwell says many in the industry were watching the auction to see what demand, buyer confidence and property prices would be like. But Ms Norwell says the sale of some of the passed in properties will be negotiated in the coming days. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the country needs international students to start returning to tertiary study, but not at the expense of undoing the work already done to stamp out COVID-19. Universities are expected to lose more than $100 million this year as COVID-19 keeps foreign students out. Mr Robertson wouldn't put a date on when students might start entering New Zealand borders, but says each tertiary institution is looking at how it would provide quarantine facilities. He says who funds the quarantine is also one of the issues.
And obviously as we move to a situation potentially where more people are coming into New Zealand, it's not likely to be as easy for the government to support people to do that. So that is one of the issues.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson. Outdoor explorers are being warned against venturing out beyond their limit this long weekend. The New Zealand Mountain Safety Council is predicting a huge surge in outdoor recreation activities as the country enjoys its first extended weekend since lockdown was lifted. Tracy Neal reports.
Chief Executive Mike Daisley says Queen's birthday weekend usually generates a spike in tramping incidents. More people are out and about and exploring new places, but this year it's likely that more will be seeking new adventures. Mr Daisley says people have been cooped up inside for weeks on end and fitness levels may have suffered. He's urging those planning trips to do better preparation, including proper weather checks and how it might affect outdoor activities. This is Tracy Neal.
Te Reinga Wairua, or Cape Reinga, has been reopened to the public in time for the long weekend. An iwi-led checkpoint was set up by Ngāti Kuri in the region at the start of the Level 4 lockdown. The northernmost tribe says it is the kaitiaki or protector of the sacred area. For Māori, Te Reinga Wairua is where the spirits of the deceased depart and return to the ancestral land Hawaiki. The area was opened at midday today in a ceremony. It's coming up to 4.5 minutes past 6. Top flight netballers are finally back on the court. The country's top players have just completed their first week back training after a 2-month layoff due to the pandemic and are now preparing for a resumption of the ANZ Premiership, which managed to get just one round in before lockdown. The competition will resume on June 19th, with all games being played at one venue in Auckland and no spectators. Silver Fern and captain of the defending champions, the Pulse, Katrina Rore, says the first week back has been somewhat surreal.
It was a bit bizarre when we first walked in, how the chairs are 3 seats apart. We can't sit next to each other. We couldn't just come in and give each other a hug, and because we hadn't seen each other for 8 or 9 weeks, which is a really long time. But again, just being in each other's company, being able to train with each other, yarn, the banter, that kind of stuff is the stuff you miss the most.
Katrina Rore. The Blues will remain at Auckland's Eden Park when Super Rugby Aotearoa kicks off next month. The Blues had considered moving to the Warriors' home ground, with them based in Australia, after Eden Park Trust and Auckland Rugby reportedly asked the Blues for a $30,000 hire fee. The fee has now been waived. That's the news.
This Sunday morning being lost. Topical in New Zealand this past week with the man who's maybe the world's expert on that. China's Belt and Road and its future relationship with the Pacific, that's on the agenda. Romance novels are set to soar in popularity, and the genre's superstar writers are often living right next door. We'll talk to one of them. Simon O'Neill, a great singer to be sure, but with no songs to sing for the foreseeable. No arias being aired in the concert halls of the world. All that and commentary on the doings of the past week in our great nation. Sunday morning starts at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, scattered showers becoming isolated tomorrow, fine spells increasing, fog patches tomorrow morning. Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. West of Te Puke, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery tomorrow. Cloudy periods and a few showers elsewhere. Waikato, Waitomo, Taupo, Taumaranui, also Gisborne through to Wairarapa. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Taranaki, Whanganui, Taihape and Manawatu. Mostly cloudy today, a few showers for Taranaki, fine weather tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, mostly cloudy with scattered rain, clearing Horowhenua and Kapiti Coast tomorrow morning. For Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, rain for a time today, cloudy periods and isolated showers tomorrow. Canterbury, cloudy with patchy drizzle, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Westland, Fiordland, Otago and Southland, mostly fine. A few showers for Westland, coastal Southland and Fiordland. Valley fog may be persistent. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with the odd shower. RNZ National, 7 minutes past 6.
And you're with Checkpoint, and the news just to hand, the traffic report for Portobello on the Otago Peninsula. No cars for the last 5 minutes, pub is open, as is Chip Shop. A lot of you getting in with your traffic reports from around the Motu. Peter says, driving Invercargill to Alexandra. No traffic, no delays, but don't tell anyone, please. Whoops, sorry, Peter. And this one, State Highway 2, Petone to North End Upper Hutt, 1 hour, 20 minutes. Nose to tail crawl all the way. Fielding to Danny Vegas to have curry night with Nana. Traffic mild, like the curry. Have a great weekend. You too. Keep me posted, 2101 on the text. The missing trampers, who sparked a massive search and rescue operation in Kahurangi National Park, won't face any charges, even though they were on a risky multi-day tramp which was forbidden during Level 3 lockdown. Dion Reynolds and Jessica O'Connor were found on Wednesday after 19 days in rugged terrain, at times in bad weather and totally out of food, but suffering only minor injuries. The 23-year-olds went bush on March 8th, even though the country had been repeatedly told to stay at home as much as possible, only to engage in low-risk activities that would avoid the need for rescues or medical care, and to restrict tramping to day walks on easy trails. Nelson Bay's Area Commander Inspector Paul Borrell says the trampers, who are now both safe and well, won't even receive a formal warning because getting lost is not an offence. I asked him if the pair knew going into the bush for 2 weeks under lockdown was wrong.
The assumption I have is yes, that they would have been.
OK, so looking at your operational guidelines, it says where there is evidence that they know what the rules are, and if the breach is sufficiently serious, you can give them a warning and you can charge them.
OK, so the material I have is around the warning, is that only where evidence of education exists and when offences are repeated or are sufficiently serious.
Sufficiently serious. So that's the key point, isn't it? Is this not sufficiently serious enough to actually formally warn them?
Yeah. So it's not actually an offence. And the other piece of this that I think that's been sort of forgotten is that around our search and rescue, we would never want to create a situation where people are reluctant to ring for help.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. So that's another, we don't follow up charging monetary accounts, invoices for our searching for that very, very reason. And this really does apply. So, yes, I absolutely understand, the frustration of many of our people in the communities who have followed the guidelines as asked and fantastically well. We have had a small number, thankfully, of people who haven't. And each case is taken on a case-by-case basis, as this one has.
Have they apologised to you and the searchers for their actions?
I haven't heard an official apology, but I certainly saw tears of gratitude and happiness and relief when they were rescued.
That's kind of different, though, isn't it? That's been grateful to be alive and be out, and everyone can appreciate that. That's different to apologising for something.
Absolutely, but I'm picking that, reflecting over the next few days and probably having a look at the media messaging that's around about, because there's, as you know, a lot of interest in this. I think the apology will be coming.
So how much did this cost, roundabout, the search?
So we haven't got an official figure. I am anticipating somewhere around the $20,000 mark. So we're just remembering with that that most of the resource around land search is volunteers. And so, there are people who are giving up their own time, supported by their employers, and absolutely passionate about the opportunity of saving lives. So the cost factor of these is often around helicopter time, and we're very, very careful the way that we plan our searches, making sure that we have good patterns and hours, and it's a meticulous process. But I'm imagining that we're going to be in the vicinity of around 20,000. I won't know that for sure. We've got a formal debrief in about 3 weeks' time, and also the accounts are coming in at the moment, and I'll be able to assess that much more accurately in the coming weeks.
Because this was a massive search. New Zealand Defence Force personnel, 2 choppers, 1 from the Defence Force, 1 commercial, 5 specialist trackers, 3 dog teams. I think you put the numbers of police at around 30, and then you had Fire and Emergency New Zealand, and as you say, you had all of these volunteers. Have they given you a big thank you, the 2 Trampers?
Yes, absolutely have. And we had our New Zealand Defence people who were the first to meet them and rescue them, and the gratitude that they talked about was amazing. The other piece is that this was 10 days into it before we were aware that they were missing.
Yeah, so on that matter, can we just clarify, did the pair formally log their intentions?
They, not formally, informally, so family were aware that they were heading into the bush, and were given approximate time. There was some cell phone contact in the early days, and when that fell away is when we were advised.
So did they resist logging their intentions formally because they knew they weren't supposed to be out in the bush during level 3?
Lisa, I can't answer that question, but that'll be subject of the debrief with them, and we'll certainly be finding that out. We've had some very strong messaging going out from Sergeant Malcolm York, who leads our search and rescue for Nelson, and the advice that he's been giving has been really good stuff around personal locator beacons, making sure that you have the right equipment, and as you've rightly talked about, informing reliable people that of your intentions, how long you intend to be in on the Tramp 4, and advice around contacting police if required.
Obviously, it is a great outcome. Nobody is taking away from that. It is fantastic that you found this pair alive and relatively unscathed. But did you give them a dressing down?
Yeah, I can't comment on that. I'll leave it for you to think about, Lisa, without saying exactly yes or no.
A lot of resource went into this from the taxpayers.
Absolutely.
Can you not just tell us that? Did they get a telling off?
So they have, there is no doubt in their mind that we are not particularly happy with their decision to go into that area.
How long had they planned to go for? What do you know about their intentions?
My understanding was it was around about 2 weeks.
So they'd planned to go in there for 2 weeks?
10 days.
Right.
10 days, yeah.
When level 3 was no travelling between regions, only day walks on easy tracks, no overnight stays, and nothing that would require a rescue or medical care, they were planning to go for 10 days?
That's my understanding. Absolutely not the greatest decision making. I think we all agree with that.
And that was Inspector Paul Borrell talking about the trampers who went bush on May 8th. Now, under level 3, police say there was 1,231 breaches of the rules, resulting in 295 prosecutions, 850 warnings and 86 youth referrals. Now, there was a Give a Little page that was set up in the name of the 2 missing trampers. One of their relatives set it up. And when we checked this afternoon, let me see what the total was. It had raised about $32,000, and that was for Lansar, and the donations continue to come in there. Artists and musicians are welcoming a $175 million package from the government aimed at protecting the jobs of 90,000 people in the arts and music sectors. The Prime Minister made the announcement in Napier today, where she's spending the long weekend, announcing a job seekers program and 4 new employment funds for the cultural sector. Anusha Bradley reports.
Jacinda Ardern says the arts sector has been decimated by the pandemic, and without government intervention, 11,000 jobs could be lost.
This is a sector that contributes to $11 billion to GDP, employs 90,000 people, and according to some of the forecasting we've had, this is also a sector that's twice as likely to be harder hit than the rest of the economy because of COVID-19.
She says the aim is to save as many of those jobs as possible. Today's money includes $8 million to help 2,000 artists find work over 4 years, $70 million to support creative projects, $60 million in a contestable fund to drive digital exports, and $20 million to help artists sell their work. Napier artist Freeman White says the cash on offer today is a good step, as a fund through Helen Clark's Labour government helped him make his way through the early stages of his career.
It was absolutely fundamental to allowing me to spend the time that I needed when I was developing my career. And so, hearing this package announced today, I just think it's super positive.
But fellow artist Martin Popplewell is a bit more wary of what actually might be produced with this money.
I don't know what it will produce other than stuff. Will undoubtedly be a very useful amount of money injected into the arts, and is that the outcome could be a lot of very bad art.
There's also $16 million to support musicians creating new music and tours, which is now more possible as gatherings of up to 100 people are allowed. And Miss Ardern is keen to get to her first gig.
Nadia Reid's doing a gig with the 100 number, the 100 limit on mass gatherings, so I'd love to be able to support her. I know it's been really tough for both hospitality but also our artists.
She might have a hard time getting a ticket. Nadia Reid's gig sold out within 5 minutes of being announced this morning. But the musician says she's thrilled with the name drop and will sort something out for the Prime Minister if she still wants to attend. As she's even more thrilled with the government support for a sector that's really suffered.
I mean, all of my touring was basically cancelled in a matter of 24 hours. And I feel that people, and myself included, are going to be much more mindful about where their money goes and what it supports. And, I think the hospitality and musicians and small businesses are going to hopefully be feeling a lot of love in the coming months.
The Prime Minister hopes that too, saying helping the arts helps the wider economy.
Someone who comes out to see a show is likely to use accommodation, to use transportation, to go and enjoy a restaurant, have a meal, be a part of the wider hospitality industry. So this is about making sure and supporting the creative sector that we are supporting a wider economy, our small businesses, our hospitality, those who are in accommodation, those who are in tourism as well.
There's also more good news for artists, with Jacinda Ardern saying it's very likely that more restrictions on mass gatherings will be lifted in the coming weeks. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
It's 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The backbone of New Zealand's economy, small businesses, will need a jumpstart to help the country's economy get moving again. That's something both government and the opposition agree on. National says if elected, it will give businesses a $10,000 cash bonus each time they hire more staff. Party leader Todd Muller announced the Jumpstart scheme after a tour of the furniture fittings company Bloom in Auckland this afternoon. Amy Williams and video journalist Dan Cook were there and filed this report.
Bloom employs more than 40 people in New Zealand and is among businesses hard hit by shutdowns due to the coronavirus. Its managing director, Michael Hawkins, says business is down by a third.
We want to retain our people. We don't see any real risk there, but the worry is we don't know what the future looks like in 3 months' time or 6 months' time. So that's really a big concern. We've already seen a drop-off, and that's not going to correct, I don't believe, and hopefully it doesn't get too much worse.
Mr Hawkins says with the help of the government's wage subsidy, Bloom has retained all its staff. He gave National Party leader Todd Muller a tour of the Auckland factory, from where its products are assembled, packaged and distributed, ahead of the leader's first policy announcement. Mr Muller outlined part of National's plan for small businesses if the party's elected. Its Jumpstart scheme would offer cash payments to businesses for each new hire from November and run for 5 months, incentivising up to 50,000 new jobs.
This is a focus on actually creating the conditions in partnership with small businesses to take a punt and re-employ people that they have had to let go over the last few months.
The scheme would be capped at 10 new employees or $100,000 per business, costing $500 million in total. It comes as the outlook for holding onto jobs looks grim. Official figures show jobs fell by a record 37,500 last month as the economy suffered a downfall from COVID-19 effects. And the Reserve Bank has warned unemployment could rise as high as 18%. Mr Muller, who's taken on the small business portfolio, says they are the backbone of the economy.
This is a signal of intent that the National Party will stand beside small business and help them grow and come out of what is the greatest economic crisis of a generation.
The government's recovery plan has provided relief for small businesses, including the wage subsidy which owners could claim for themselves to help retain staff. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the government has provided immediate support to businesses.
Our focus for now, as I think most businesses has been around keeping people employed through things like the wage subsidy scheme, moving to support people's income through things like the income relief payment, and creating jobs and creating them right now.
Mr Robertson says he'd be prepared to consider a grant for small businesses in months to come. As for most small businesses' survival, Michael Hawkins says only time will tell how they'll fare.
After 6 months we'll know a little more, but it's still really hard to know. I don't think anyone can predict it. Certainly I don't claim to be smart enough to do that. there's so much unknowns.
Mr Hawkins says it is vitally important to get small businesses back and running so they can help rebuild the economy. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
A number of you getting in touch about that cash for jobs policy from National, mixed reviews. This person says, call it what it is, National Job Creation Payment is an election bribe, not going to be paid unless they are in government. Another one says, 10k is only 2 to 3 months' salary. A company won't take someone on a permanent basis based on that. And another, if there is work, a company will employ people. There is no need for National to use taxpayers' money for unproductive uses. Top flight netballers are finally back on court. The country's top players have just completed their first week back training after a 2-month layoff due to the pandemic and are now preparing for a resumption of the ANZ Premiership, which managed to get just one round in before lockdown. The competition will resume on June 19th, with all games being played at the one venue in Auckland and no crowds. That means sides will have to fly in and out of Auckland on charter flights for their games over the next 10 weeks of competition. Silver Fern and captain of the defending champions, the Pulse, Katrina Rore, told sports editor Stephen Hewson it's all going to take some getting used to.
Yeah, it has been bizarre, especially being at home and training by yourself. It was fine, but you definitely had days where you just didn't want to train by yourself and things like that. But, you know, back in here, you can wake up in the morning, you turn up somewhere and there's going to be 10 other people there ready to go and train with you and really help you and motivate you, which has been nice.
Were you well set up at home, gym-wise and things, or how did that pan out? Yeah,
I was very fortunate. My husband had some stuff from his gym and then I got some stuff from our gym as well. So we had a great garage set up and for the first few weeks we could train together, and then he went back to work at level 3, so I was stuck by myself again. But the first 4 weeks I didn't mind, and then I just was itching to get back into it, just like the rest of us.
And what's been the reaction from the rest of the team when you did get back? I mean, you've been back into it a week now.
Yeah.
How keen was everyone to see each other?
Everyone was very, very keen. It was a bit bizarre when we first walked in, how the chairs are 3 seats apart. We can't sit next to each other. We couldn't just come in and give each other a hug, and because we hadn't seen each other for 8 or 9 weeks, which is a really long time. But again, just being in each other's company, being able to train with each other, yarn, the banter, that kind of stuff is the stuff you miss the most.
And you've got the Stars first up. It's a interesting match-up given the way things finished last season. I mean, how do you think things are going to shape up there?
Yeah, it'll be I feel like it'll be a bit of a feeling out period, that first game. You know, we've had no pre-season games going into this, I suppose, second season of our season, so it'll be a different 12-minute quarters, a chartered flight, so it's a little bit of the unknown, but that first game will be, I can't wait for the first game. It's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out, but our team's looking great. Everyone in lockdown worked so hard and we haven't lost anything, which is great.
And you've been doing Bronco fitness tests.
Yeah.
How did you go on those?
Yeah, no, not too bad actually, not too bad. So I was happy with how I came back with everybody else. I think a few of the girls got PBs, which is so awesome.
And where do you sit in that Bronco test? Where
do I sit? I think I got, in our team, I think I got 3rd. So I'll take that.
And what, mid-quarter first?
Yeah, 2 mid-quarters first. Yeah, definitely.
Because the Super Rugby players have been doing them. I know the distances are a little bit different. You're up for a clash of the codes? Bronco fitness test?
I was messaging Sarah Hidney over the break and I was asking her what their Bronco was and how they did it. I gave it a crack and theirs is too long. No way, I'll have a netball court and changing direction on a court any day of the week, thanks.
And the charter flights, I mean, how much of a factor is that going to be for teams, do you think?
Yeah, I have no idea. It will be interesting. Small planes, especially in and out of Wellington, should be fun. 10 weeks on the road will be tough, but if we get to play and we get to get this competition up and running and hopefully get through the full 3 rounds, then it'll be totally worth it. We're just up for anything. Yeah,
you'll be glad you're not the Steel at this point.
Oh gosh, I know. I've been on phone calls with them and things and seen. I think the Invercargill crew have to drive to Dunedin to get chartered flights from there, which is tough. We think it's tough going 10 weeks from Wellington, but let alone 10 weeks from Invercargill. Yeah, so, people are making a lot of sacrifices and choices to come and get this competition up and running, but this is what we want. We want live sport on TV, people being able to see it and us being able to still have our jobs and play.
How do you think it's going to be without the crowds? Because, they have such a big impact for netball and they're so loud and close. How odd is that going to be?
Yeah, it will be odd. Obviously, never done that before. But who knows if they'll do what the NRL have done and put crowd noises on, see how it goes, and yeah, depending on what you might even hear on or off the court. It'll be unusual, but I suppose after the first round or two, it'll probably just become the norm and we'll get on with it.
And that was Silver Fernon captain of the defending champions, the Pulse, Katrina Rore, speaking to sports editor Stephen Houston. Before we head off, some more feedback on National's proposal for cash for jobs. This person says, does National's wage incentive apply to migrants or temporary visa holders? Don't know, good question. Someone else says 4 weeks of wage subsidy over 5 months pretty much equals the same as this cash for jobs, 10,000. The difference is, they point out, is that National wants to give cash to businesses for their rents, etc., not to the employees. And some of you have got in touch about the fact that we've got one active case of COVID-19 and the bubble opening up to Australia. Dr. Paul Keyes says Sean Hendy refers to managing biosecurity risks at our border. There's a record of multiple major severe incursions, Mycoplasma bovis, Didymo et al. We will soon be in a very select group of island nations with zero coronavirus in the country, and to jeopardise that status for an unknown economic gain seems short-sighted to me. I plead for keeping our freedom from any coronavirus while we watch what unfolds around the world in the next few months. Nobody knows whether open borders will lead to economic gain in those countries where coronavirus is ever present. We can open our borders rapidly, but we cannot eliminate coronavirus again so rapidly. Thanks for keeping me company today. Drive carefully as you head off around the country. Have a great weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Data modelling expert Sean Hendy warns there's an ever-decreasing risk some cases have been missed as the country marks a full week with no new COVID-19 infections. Musicians are thrilled with the government's $175 million package to boost the arts, which includes $5 million for a live touring fund. Police say the Trampers, who sparked a huge search in Kahurangi National Park, won't face charges despite the 10-day tramp being forbidden during Level 3. And an auction in Queenstown has sold only 1/5 of the 21 properties up for sale today. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7 o'clock.
Tonight on Nights, we've got a double header on Friday Night Live. Matthew Smith and Nick Dow both sing and write pretty good songs. The cows are still coming home on Country Life, but do they have enough feed? Robbie Nicol continues to tell lies about New Zealand's past, and we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the unknown, because there's a lot of that